Discussions in this show are for entertainment and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and neither SmartPro Financial nor Bridgeway Wealth are affiliated. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Working Wealth Podcast. I am Patrick Rogers.
And I'm Haley.
And we are going to talk today about the 3 phases of retirement planning. But before we dive into that, let's talk about us a little bit. So, Haley, I know you have some exciting plans coming up. What are you doing for dinner tonight?
What?
We got to make it fun, people. I mean, we're just talking about financial planning stuff. So let's talk about some real stuff that matters here.
Okay. I thought you were going to ask me what we were doing for dinner tonight.
No, because we're doing separate dinner tonight.
Well, that's what I was going to make. That was the joke I was going to make. We're doing separate dinner. You're on your own, and you have to feed Samuel because it's Mom's night out.
And what does Mom's night out entail?
Mom's night out is me, Mom, Haley, meeting her friend, who's another mom, Hannah, and we're going to downtown Greenville. We're going to Scoundrel.
Scoundrel. That sounds scandalous.
I know. What it really is it seems like a very pretty restaurant. And we got a nice reservation, and they have espresso martinis. That's Mom's night out.
Gotcha. And there's going to be food involved too, right?
Yeah, but let's be honest. It's at 6 p.m. We're getting together at 6 p.m. on a Thursday. So,
yeah, it is what it is. You got to plan that out. So, I mean, I don't know what me and Sam are going to do. He's probably going to have some breast milk, and I'll figure out what I'll eat. So, but it is what it is. This is parent life these days. With
and I'll be back before he needs to get fed again. So,
Yeah, there you go. All right.
That's
well, cool.
funny.
Well, thanks for sharing. So let's dive in.
I'm sure everyone's so excited to know my plans.
Yeah. Well, we're going to dive in to the 3 phases of retirement planning. And, for me, I think it's important maybe to start by just laying out the obvious, or what I think might be obvious is, we're going to talk about 3 different phases of retirement planning. Are there 3 phases of retirement planning?
That's a great question because I think probably a lot of people are like, wait, what? Isn't retirement just like one time in my life?
That's a good question, right? And it technically is a season of life if you're thinking about actually being in retirement. But we're talking about retirement planning, right? And everything we talk about here, right? If you haven't gotten the picture yet, we're talking about the mindset or the nature of being where you're being proactive with your future, like being proactive and intentional with how you are planning or appropriating your resources for the future.
Okay, let me take a little segue on the retirement thing real quick.
Please do, yeah.
Okay, retirement planning. How long has that been a concept? That's my question because, I hear my parents talk about how the dynamic of the workplace has changed so much. Like my grandma, she worked at the phone company for, 40 plus years. She has a pension. My parents, some people my parents' age still have like the pension option or, specifically my parents, there's like work in the service. So there's money that way.
Yeah.
But I guess the concept of the 401k, When do you know when that came on the scene? And I'm sorry, I didn't really prepare you for that, but this just hit me, kind of a history lesson. When did it become important for an individual to take responsibility for their retirement planning?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good question because it's probably what the people are wondering, right?
Well, I don't know. It's what Haley's wondering.
And
Haley's got Mom's night out tonight, and Haley's feeling sassy.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and I think I don't have all the history on this, but from my limited experience and knowledge, just research and stuff over time, 401ks came about in the 70s.
Okay.
It's a Section 401k plan, meaning Section 401 subsection K of the Internal Revenue Code. In case people didn't know that. But it was started under the ERISA Act, which is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, which was passed, and people don't realize this. Your employer-sponsored retirement plan is not a perk from your company.
That's right.
It is a supplemental benefit you can elect to participate in. You should elect to participate in my opinion, to help prepare and provide for your future. But the 401ks were launched as a supplemental benefit employers could offer in lieu of self-funding pension programs. And a lot of this comes out of the fact that, like, even go back to Social Security in the early 1900s, that Social Security was designed as a was it the New Deal under FDR? I can't remember exactly what the
I know
the
you're not
legislation
asking
was.
me.
So,
Okay.
sorry, I got a 2 on the AP US history exam, so I don't know if this really counts here. But no, it's like Social Security came about as a additional government subsistence payment if you lived beyond the standard longevity of life. Right, that's why the age of 62, and you got bumps for every single year up to your full retirement age, and then we could talk about this a whole nother time. But part of the reason
That's how Social Security came around.
oh yeah, and
Was
there
in case you lived so long.
for lack of a better
Here's
term.
some money.
Yep, basically, yeah, pretty much. So because life expectancy was a lot less.
So then
right?
people just banking on that in retirement now is kind of,
Let's
let
get
me just say it,
philosophical.
it's laughable.
Irresponsible. Yeah, it really is. It's and that's why we push so much for people to be proactive and intentional with their planning, because you shouldn't
Wow.
rely on the government for a lot of reasons. But also the system we have today is broken, right? It's unfunded, it's underfunded because so many people are taking and no one is giving, right? We're going to stop that conversation
Absolutely.
right there
Yeah,
because we
for
could.
sure.
I'm not drinking right now, and I need a bourbon to finish that conversation. Just
But you
to be
should join
honest.
me on Mom's Night Out.
But no. So in our reality though, like thinking about this, just high level, right? The old days was people worked until they couldn't work anymore, and their family took care of them. And then companies started offering pensions because we went through the Industrial Revolution, we went from a farming agricultural society to more of an industrial society where people worked in plants, they worked in factories,
Yep.
and then working condition stipulations and requirements came about in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then we kind of led into this more career path instead of just a labor force path as industry changed, technology changed in the early 1900s, leading to more like as longevity of life grew, companies started offering pensions and things of that nature.
Okay.
Well, as economic things change as well, that led to where pensions were not really long-term going to be viable because longevity increased at a faster rate
Because we're
than
living
funding
longer.
is. Exactly. And
Interesting.
people work later, right? Things like that.
Okay.
So 401ks and also like leading into IRAs and other things. I couldn't tell you exactly when the traditional IRA came about.
And I'm not asking you that. I
But
was just-
we'll find out. Like now I'm curious. I want to
Yeah.
go back and find out. But 401ks came about in the 70s as a separate retirement offering for employers to provide in lieu of having pensions.
but
right?
now there's not pension. There are no pensions.
A lot of them are being closed down, right? Like you have pensions through some major companies. Like I know actually IBM, they've actually just redone their pension. But a
Okay.
lot of companies have closed out, bought out their pensions because they don't want that liability, that risk on their balance sheet to maintain and sustain that for their
Because
employees.
it's a growing liability.
It's a massive growing liability.
Wow, that's
because
so
every time
interesting.
someone lives longer, they're paying more money out than money is going in. So that again, that's another topic of conversation.
Yeah, but that's cool. I mean, that's
Yeah.
interesting to know.
Yeah, so we'll
Because
dive
we
into
saw
that
a
more.
massive shift. And I even knew that before. Well, I don't know if I knew that before we were in the industry because I feel like now we've been doing this for a while. But like, I think it's a little bit more common knowledge to know that there used to be pensions and now there's not. There's 401ks, but it's interesting to know a little bit of maybe why that is.
Right. And I think it is important to note maybe before we jump off of this is a lot of the legislation that's changing how retirement savings are implemented. We had Secure Act 1.0, the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act was passed at the end of 2019.
Okay.
Okay. And that did some massive shifts on how retirement accounts are set up for contributions, for distributions, how they're passed down when you die. Certain rules around types of plans and features of plans changed starting January 1, 2020, right before COVID started. But then we also had Secure 2.0 Act passed at the end of 2022.
Okay.
Some things started going into effect in 23, now 24, 25, 26. We're going to have a lot of things shifting, even to the point where moving forward, a lot of companies, even small businesses, are going to be ultimately forced into providing 401ks by law and requiring like mandatory minimum automatic contribution rates, upwards of 10%. Automatic increases every year to get you up to 15%. There's a lot of different things coming in the retirement landscape that people aren't
Interesting.
aware of,
Yeah.
which things that financial planners and talking heads on the radio have been discussing for 20, 40 years.
They see the writing
Now,
on the
like
wall.
now it's becoming law,
Okay.
right? Which again, pros and cons, positives, negatives here. I think it's good, but I don't necessarily think having the government involved in certain aspects of that is good because by making improvements, they're also putting in stipulations or requirements that are going to be a detriment to people.
Okay.
We can talk more about that later.
Right. Okay. But for the sake of today's conversation,
Yeah, let's get back on it.
we're talking about those 3 different phases of retirement. And I guess we'll highlight obviously what they are, why they're all important, how they all kind of play a role in the overall, just picture of your financial life. So I guess number 1,
Yeah. So the first one is the one that a lot of
Accumulation.
people, it's accumulation, right? It's the one that a lot of people think about in terms of just investing, right?
yeah, that's the one
But-
we're in.
That's the one that we're in. Yep. We are accumulating our wealth. We're accumulating assets. A lot of our clients are in that phase.
Yes.
I would typically say, right?
A lot of, I feel like that's a pretty wide age range.
It
of
is.
people.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes it so unique and so complex at the same time,
Okay.
right? So like the varied priorities of those in accumulation, generation by generation, decade by decade, stage of life by stage of life, depending on your family unit structure, the different complexities can vastly impact your ability to accumulate and how well you accumulate over time, right?
Okay.
And this goes back to the conversation we had around the 5 areas of value, where we talked about cash flow and having margin in your life to be able to accumulate, to be able to buy assets. But in the accumulation phase, the focus has to be doing everything you can to accumulate assets to generate the most value possible, to turn that value into income in the future to sustain your standard of living. But that is a balancing act, right? And it's a constant challenge of priorities of, well, I want to have a good life for my kids, or I want to be able to pay for private school, or I want to be able to save for college, or I want to be able to take trips, or whatever that balancing priority is, along with thinking about the long term and the future. And the reason why, and other people will argue with me on this, and that's fine. They can. They have their opinions. I have the truth, right? But the reality is the accumulation phase is one of the most important phases of the 3 in retirement planning, because how well you accumulate will directly impact your quality of life once you get to retirement.
Right, because it depends on whether or not you can sustain
Yep.
your current level of living. It depends on whether you can take a step up, or it is going to, you've not done great and you're going to have to take a step down, which
Yeah.
I think that when anyone gets to that stage of life, I don't really think you want to be told that you're going to have to dial it back.
Yeah. And I have that conversation with folks a lot, which is, again, this is why I'm a little bit more passionate about this these days is
Yeah.
it's not fun being on my side of the fence where I have to tell people, hey, like, this is the reality of the situation.
No,
you
it's
know?
not.
But going back, like, we don't have to talk about that piece of it. But the thing that I think is so important is the behaviors and disciplines that you formulate in your life during accumulation are the ones that will directly impact your quality of life down the road.
Right. Of course.
Many studies and statistics have shown.
It's not just your money life.
Well, it's not. It's not. Yeah, it's every part of life, right? And we'll talk about total wealth concept.
Yeah. Are
in
you in
another
the gym?
episode,
Are you
but-
doing what you need to do? Are you eating healthy? Guess what? During these young years, what you're doing right now physically is going to impact you when you're older. It's just
Yeah.
the same thing. It's just a different industry. It's just a different thing.
Yeah, and just like we've talked about before, time, discipline, location, those are the 3 fundamentals of, investing, and that it carries over in every part of your life, right?
Right, absolutely.
But the thing about accumulation that's so important, so impactful is those behavior patterns you create, and then how you can carry that forward in the future. And what I was going to mention is there's been tremendous numbers of studies that show those who do really, really well at accumulating by the time they retire, from the time they retire, until they die, their net worth on average multiplies by 2.5 or higher.
Okay.
So like those who have good behavior patterns and have good disciplines and good strategies and they do really, really well,
Yeah.
their net worth continues to increase.
Yeah, because you're
as
taking
they
a
retire.
disciplined person
Exactly.
into retirement who all of a sudden doesn't lose
Correct.
their morals or their personality.
Yeah, their behaviors.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
Their behaviors.
Yeah. And that's one of those things too, and that does bring up some other challenges where I do have some clients who are in retirement. We have to say, hey, you can afford to spend more money. Like you worked hard for this. Like I
Right.
want you to spend money because you have done well. Like you've been a good steward, right? But that also goes back to part of our mission that we talked about of, we partner with diligent
Right.
workers, committed savers, and cheerful givers to balance the joy of living today while building and preserving generational wealth. And that balancing act is the most important piece here, right? Because you can default one way or the other. I've talked with folks that they say, well, my parents had a bad experience with an advisor, so I'm just not going to fool with it. I'm not going to invest for the future. I've had
Yeah.
folks that say, hey, like, I'm so scared about the future. I'm going to save everything and live on beans and rice today. For me, it's more so how do you balance those things together, especially in accumulation where you're fighting the priorities of kids, school, life, debt, home ownership, job changes, et cetera, to try to use your margin to accumulate wealth for the future.
Okay. So that's accumulation.
That's accumulation.
That's a large part of life.
It is. And that's why it's so
I
important.
feel like it's possibly the longest stage.
I would say it is the longest. It's becoming, I'd say the length of time that lasts compared to the last phase is becoming more equal.
Yeah, more one-to-one.
Yeah, just because we're living longer.
Right. Okay.
Right.
But the shortest phase is
Is
definitely the middle, which
is
is
the second one.
the preservation.
Well, it's the optimization.
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 Yeah,
No, you're
That's
fine.
the third.
You're fine. A lot of people would call this preservation, but I have an intentional reason for calling the third one preservation.
Okay,
This one
yep.
optimization. So you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of focus accumulating your assets. But as you get closer and closer to using those assets, right? You want to build up things of value, build up a net worth, a liquid net worth of things that carry value so that we can optimize that to turn it into efficient income over time to live off of. That includes certain tax planning measures. That includes certain income planning measures, asset allocation, risk, things of that nature where we're thinking of, well, if I'm really, really young and I'm trying to grow my assets, I'm going to be more risky and I'm going to be more growth focused, understanding the market goes up and down or whatever types of assets I'm investing in, there's going to be a long time period to grow that. But eventually I'm going to have to turn those assets into an income stream for me to live
Right.
off of.
How long and when do you think someone kind of enters this phase?
My personal belief is when you're like 5 to 7 years from retirement is when optimization becomes really, really instrumental. So when you're getting around age 55, I'd say that's like the last point in time you need to be like that should be your drop dead date for being very intentional about optimization.
Okay, stick with me for a second. I'm trying to figure out how to say
Yeah.
this right. And, I get worried, but I'm just going to try and go through it here. All right, so you're accumulating, right? And then you have optimization, and you're going through that. I'm taking in money, I get a paycheck, and then all of a sudden you've got to take these savings, and those become your income.
Yeah.
What I'm confused by, or what I feel like other people also can get confused by, is that maybe they're just focused on, gosh, I can't wait to retire. So ready to leave this place. I want to get out of here, or whatever. Or I'm ready. Or it could be a really, really beautiful, positive thing. Like I'm just ready to travel with my wife, or I'm ready to spend time with my grandkids and all these things. But sometimes what I have noticed is that people let their emotions dictate a retirement decision. And then there's like things that pop up, right? I mean, I think we see this a good bit. Things that happen that require money.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it probably would be a really good idea to start. You can diagnose some of this beforehand. Some things, life happens, y'all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trees fall on your
You can't handle
house.
a tree fall on the house.
I mean, a tree fell on my
car
house twice now.
accident. Yeah.
If it happens the third time I'm leaving, Patrick can come with me. But
Yeah.
like things just happen. But there's some things that you know that you want to do.
Yeah.
So like I feel like this time period is super crucial because I feel like you need to be analyzing
Yeah.
where you are. Like, oh, you want to buy a new car? You might. You might. It might end up being the best decision to continue working
Yeah.
to get that done instead of taking from those savings back down. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how to say what I'm saying.
I think you're saying it very well because
Okay.
I'd probably be a little bit more direct and harsh about it.
but I think we need to talk about this because
yeah.
it is a constant conversation that I'm at least hearing
Yeah.
that you're having with people.
Well, and that even goes back to like the three phases are connected, right? So like your decisions you make in accumulation, not even behaviorally, but like tax decisions. You know, a big tax decision you make for your life that people don't think about, probably one of the most important tax decisions you make around retirement planning is, are you putting money in pre-tax or Roth? Do you want to have to pay Uncle Sam every time you take money out down the road?
Yeah, because
Or
what's
do you
so
want to have the freedom
confusing-
to use your money without having to pay taxes?
Yeah, because you're looking at your nest egg. You're like, oh, I've got $2 million saved up, but you haven't paid taxes yet.
Yeah. And it's a growing tax liability for the
Woo-woo.
future. And yeah. No, so this is really important. We can spend a lot of time talking about that piece. But
Yeah.
what I
It's
would
just so amazing to me. And it'll always
Yeah.
be amazing to me. People cannot take behavior out of financial planning.
right.
You
and
cannot
that's-
take it out. And you also,
Yeah.
one thing else you can't take out is the conversations with your spouse or your whoever you're partnered up with, whatever. You have to be talking to them because his idea of retirement might be totally different from mine.
Yeah.
And if we don't see eye to eye on that, how do I know if we're saving enough? I don't know. These are just my thoughts.
Yeah.
Haley moments.
I think it's important that you mentioned that you can't take behavior out because even the CFP board, so Certified Financial Planner Practitioner Board, they completely changed their curriculum of the licensing or certification process a couple years ago to where they include now a behavioral finance element to being able to get certified as a CFP. So that's like one of the, I think it's the 8th criteria now that you have to be tested on be tested on and show competency in.
That you personally.
That you understand
that
behavioral
you
finance and you
understand
can
that-
help people
okay,
navigate
okay.
those decisions, right?
Understood.
But yeah, that's so important to be able to navigate that as part of that plan, right? But going back to optimization, right? That's certain things like tax allocation, it's asset allocation, it's how do we start to think about, what kind of income stream our assets can become, right?
Okay. Yeah.
If you have $100,000, it's a very different situation than $10 million, right? If you have
It is.
$10 million in pre-tax money and $500,000 in Roth, that's a very different situation, right? So understanding the complexities and idiosyncrasies of those different pieces is going to be important. But I will just add one other thing, not necessarily directly related to this content I wanted to share, but just throw it in there, is a question I get from a lot of people is, well, how do I actually turn my retirement accounts or my investment accounts into income?
I think it's a great question.
Yeah, and it's
Very
and it's-
practical.
And it's actually, we just do a 180 on how we got it in there, right? So in the same way you consistently invest or should be consistently investing on a monthly basis or regular basis into your accounts, we do the same thing to create a paycheck coming out.
Okay.
So for most people, what we do is we just say, hey, based on this asset amount, based on your tax plan, based on your goals, your needs, we're going to distribute X amount of dollars from your accounts. Maybe withhold taxes if that's part of the plan, things of that nature, but just create a paycheck for you.
Okay.
Now, how we divide the assets up, if we use different products, things like that to create sustainability, that's a different story. But the fundamentals of financial planning are very simple, right? It's money in, it's money out. It's how you maintain it, how you sustain it, how you tax it, how you transfer it. Those are the pieces that become especially critical during this optimization phase.
Okay. Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a great question.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of advisors just focus on that optimization phase. They call it the pre-retirees, right, or retirees in transition. But it's really understanding the complexities of those different elements, Social Security, all those different things, Medicare, to make sure that people are optimizing or being as efficient as possible with their resources.
Okay. Do you think that kind of covers phase 2?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And we'll talk more about different parts of that. But
Oh, yeah.
but phase 2 kind of transitions, and I would say this is more so once you get into retirement and you're kind of past your go-go years. So meaning like the go-go years is like, hey, I'm retired, I'm excited, I've got energy, I'm motivated, and I'm going to be spending more maybe in these first few years. Once you get to a point where you kind of slow down and settle in and
Okay.
things become more status quo, that's where I'd say we're in the preservation phase. And the preservation phase is where the key focus is, how do I make sure I don't, outlive my money?
Right.
That's
Very
important.
practical.
Like, I've never met a single person that said they wish they had less money in retirement.
Right.
Every person wishes they had more money. Even those with several $1 million sometimes wish they had more money, right? But it's how do we make sure we don't outlive our money? And then whatever residual we do have, how can we be charitable with it? How can we have a bigger impact on this earth? How can we, make sure that passes successfully to our other generations? Depending on how much money we have, can we be a blessing or can we be a curse to our family? Be a blessing or be a curse to our community? Those kind of things. And that's where you can, again, be more creative and more intentional using certain rules like qualified charitable distributions or donor advised funds or RMD planning in a specific way, or even thinking about long-term care, how you cover those kinds of expenses. This is where we can get really, really creative around how to use the different tools available and the different resources you've accumulated. Again, accumulation connects to this,
Right.
To really build out that successful plan in retirement.
Okay.
So thinking about the three different phases, right? We have accumulation, we have optimization, we have preservation, right? There's a lot of different complexities or details that matter in each of those, and regardless of which one you're in, right? Like I mentioned earlier, just focusing on the fundamentals and the foundations. Being disciplined about where your money goes, being intentional and proactive to whatever degree, right? The first step of just, okay, I'm going to start keeping track of where my money's going.
Right.
Or I'm going to increase my savings rate in my 401k. Or, hey, like I realize, my company, when I set up my 401k, I just did whatever their default investment option was.
Yeah,
I
look
wanna
into
look
that.
at this and
Yeah.
make sure it's the right thing. Like all those are proactive steps you can take that can be a really good benefit, could be a very good helpful benefit to improve or enhance what you have down the road.
Yeah. Doesn't have to necessarily be major sweeping changes.
Yeah.
Just 1% better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just a little bit better every single day.
Yeah.
Consistent progress is always going to be the thing that wins out over trying to
Yeah.
be fancy or be,
Super creative
complex.
where you just,
Yeah.
it's not a quick fix.
Yeah. And I mean, from my experience, sometimes the most creative option is just saying, hey, you already know what to do, just do it.
Yeah. That's true.
And maybe the creativity comes in finding a way to convince yourself or motivate yourself to do something you've known you need to do, but you just didn't feel like you could do it.
Right.
And the creativity is, well, how can I make this more fun?
That's right.
Because if something's fun to us, we're going to do it always.
Right.
So like vision planning about the future of the different retirement strategies, like that can be a good way to think, well, hey, like if I do want to buy a plane down the road, or if I do want to, have a beach house, or
Yeah, I think if you want to buy a plane
Yeah.
down the road, you definitely need to have that conversation.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But yeah, just thinking about that, it's important to, just be intentional and proactive, nonetheless.
Yeah.
And we're going to beat that horse again, so I'm going to stop
cool.
right there. So
Great. Well, I think that wraps it up for us.
okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep. Have a good day. Discussions in this show are for entertainment and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and neither SmartPro Financial nor Bridgeway Wealth are affiliated.